It's Lori here. I'm back to do part one of my March reading wrap up. March was a weird month. I will just say that. It was a weird month. If you've been following my reading vlogs, you've seen my room basically flooded the basically the first day of April, my room flooded. But we found out my room was flooding. So it was a really weird month. Like I had a really weird reading month. I read a lot of e-arcs in the first half of the month. And I had a pretty good reading month for the first half of the month, but the second half of the month, I picked up a big fantasy book and I'm still in the middle of reading it, and it made me a little bit slumpy, I'll be honest. But also, I've been doing a lot of room cleaning, decluttering, getting rid of a lot of books. I got rid of six, about like 6 to 10 bins of books already. This is the primary books in my collection behind me and two shelves up. So it was a weird month. I have been on like a decluttering phase, which is always good. So yeah, it's just been a weird time. But I want to go through the first half of the books that I read in the month. Most of these are e-arcs that I have read through NetGalley. Some of them aren't, but most of them are. So let's get into it. This clip this is gonna be my March reading wrap. It's actually my April reading wrap up. So the first book that I wound up finishing in the month of April was Brightly Woven, the graphic novel by Alexandra Bracken. Photo here. For those that don't know, this is Alexandra Bracken's debut novel, and it was the first book she ever wrote, and it was supposed to become a series, but it didn't. So this is sort of like an adaptation of that book, but also it's changed a lot of things. It's been a bit since I read it, but I remember reading this book. I really liked the way that this story was told, and I struggled a little bit reading her primary book. But you basically follow this character who's some type of witch. I'll say that. There's like some type of witch element. And she sort of goes on an adventure to sort of save her kingdom and also her village. And it was just fun. I really like the relationship between the two main characters in this book. I love the art style. I thought it was great to revisit this story. You can't actually get Brightly Woven anymore. You can probably find it in like an older library, but it's like out of print. I really liked it. I think when I read Brightly Woven, I gave that book like 3 stars. There was significant changes to this, if I'm remembering my reading correctly. Like they changed the ages of the character. There was more of a romance in this book than was in her primary book, or her, the book that the book that this graphic novel was based on. But I really enjoyed it. I really liked the writing style. I thought that the changes that were made were super effective, and I wound up giving this one 4 stars for review. Weird day when my room flooded. It was a really weird day, I'll say that. I also wound up finishing the Promise Volume 3 of the Avatar The Last Airbender comics. Here is a photo. Loved seeing these characters again. Like, it's just so nice to be back in these world with these characters. I really like the whole journey between all these volumes, how it was about Aang keeping a promise to Zuko, and the promise was not what I thought it was going to be at the start of this series, but I really liked it. And I also just started reading The Search, which is the next volume in this series, and I'm really excited to dive into that one because that one's about Zuko's mom, and I'm really excited to find out what happened with Zuko's mom. So that one I wound up giving 4 stars. Overall, I would probably give the whole series like 4 stars, but I really enjoy that one, and I'm definitely excited to keep reading the comics in that series as well. Was also the Time Warp YA book club read, and that is A Cupid's Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow by Laura Taylor Namey. I thoroughly love this book. I think it's probably one of my favorite reads of the month for sure. But it basically follows this girl named Lila, and she is going through a lot. In a span of like 2 to 3 months, she loses her boyfriend, her grandmother, and her best friend, all in different ways. Her boyfriend breaks up with her grandma passes away, and her best friend bails on plans that they have to do after high school. And she's just sort of really dealing with a lot. She's a baker. She lives in Florida. She works at her parents' bakery, um, and she works in like a Latina bakery. So her parents are really concerned about her mental health. So they sent her to move to England to spend the summer with her aunt and her cousin in England, and she winds up basically like taking her Latina cuisine and her Latina desserts and sort of giving them to the people of Britain. And it is just an adorable story. There's a definitely a romance in this that I was super invested in, but it also is a lot about self-discovery and also about it does touch on anxiety and depression. And there was a lot of harder topics in this read, but I loved England as like a background. I want to travel so badly. I wanted to travel before the pandemic, but now that like I literally can't travel, I'm so hopeful that we can travel soon, but I really want to go back to England. I have friends in England, and I just loved reading this book. I thought the romance was so sweet. I thought the self-discovery elements was really really sweet. And I love that this book took a really hard look at anxiety and depression and what we can do to sort of make a change in our lives. And I really, really enjoyed this. I gave this one 4 stars, and it's definitely one of my favorite reads of the month for sure. So the next read is a little bit of a disappointment for me, and that is Sky Hunter by Mary Lou. I did have an e-arc of this one as well. I also got a physically copy from the publisher. I wanted to like this book a lot. I have really enjoyed one series by Mary Lou, and that is the Wild Card and Warcross series. But this one follows a girl named Mara, and she basically it becomes a fighter for this civilization, and basically every single continent or country in this thing has been overtaken by the Federation, and she is their last line of defense in this little sub community. Um, and when her shield is killed, it sort of sends her on a different path than she was necessarily expecting. And when she comes across a prisoner from the Federation, her world sort of gets turned upside down. I like the characters, but again, the characters did not capture me, and the plot wasn't that fast paced enough to keep me reading. So I struggled a little bit with this one. I'll definitely try to check out the sequel because I liked it. It just wasn't my favorite, and I only wound up giving this one 3 stars. I think I more struggled with like I like the characters, but I didn't love them, and the plot was nothing like shockingly new. But I enjoyed it. It just wasn't my favorite. I wound up giving it 3 stars. The book I picked up was one that I was really excited for, and that is What's Not to Love by Emily Weberly and Austin Sigmund Broker. Their newest release. I actually do have a physical copy. I just haven't opened it up yet, but here's a picture. I really wound up liking this one. I love books about enemies to lovers, or, enemies to more, in that's like one of my favorite tropes. I really enjoy this one. It's basically follow Ethan and Allison. I think those are their names. It's been a bit since I read this book. I read this earlier in the month, but they're basically they're academic rivals in just about everything, and they sort of make their peers and their teachers I feel a little bit uncomfortable, because it does create a little bit of like a toxic environment to sort of work in for everyone else. They also they're on everything together. They work on the paper together, and they're competing to be valedictorian. They want to go to Ivy League colleges. So to combat all of their like negative environment and their toxicity, their principal forces them to work together so that she can write them a letter of recommendation for the college of their choice. So they have to plan a 5-year reunion at their high school, and things just go from there. I really found this book to be super charming, super fun. It it was set in a high school, and like it's been so long since I've both been in high school, but also been in a high school that's like full of kids. Our schools are so weird now due to COVID. I just really liked it. I know that Allison had a really big self-discovery journey throughout this whole read that I really really enjoyed. It was just such a fun read. One that really I read it super quickly. I also really like Ethan as a main character. I know that this book is loosely based on Emily and Austin's real life relationship, and I really liked it, and I wound up giving it 4 stars, and I'm really excited to read their next book and then their adult debut coming out soon. But this one was definitely high on my list of favorites for the first half of the month. Actually, an early book. It will be out in early May, and that is The Last Fallen Star by Gracie Kim. That got my 5 star read of the month. My first one, I haven't finished all my books for the month, but I really like this one. This one is a Korean mythology themed novel with kitsunes mixed with witchcraft. And you follow this young girl, and she is adopted into this family. And her family is basically healing witches, and she is not a witch. She doesn't have any witch magic in her family. Little so does she think. But when her sister is about to become a full-fledged witch, she and her sister try to do a sharing spell so they could share the power with each other. But when that goes disastrously wrong and secrets are revealed, she needs to go on an adventure to not only save her family's life but also her sister's life, and it uncovers a mystery that she never knew she was expected. I adored this book. I did not want to put this book down. It was great. I am a big fan of Korean mythology. Ever since I watched Teen Wolf and they did the Kitsune arcs, I've really enjoyed that like element of Korean mythology. I'm also a big fan of like witchcraft stories, and this melded the two so perfectly. I love this book so much. Um it's definitely my favorite Rick Riordan imprint novel so far. I mean, Arusha is very much up there, but I really like this one. I also love that there was a best friend element, and there was just a lot of fun settings, and it was great. There was also a really fun sister story at the heart of this one, and it was great. I wound up giving it 5 stars, and I'm definitely going to check out the sequel. I do not know when that will be out, but I'm definitely going to get it because this one was definitely such a fun read, and I read it very, very quickly. And I really enjoyed it. So if you're definitely check this one out in May because it was a fun read for sure. I read quite a few Rick Riordan Presents novels this month. So the next one I listened to, and that is Arusha and the Tree of Wishes by Ronnie Chosky. I listened to this one, but here's a photo. Love that Rick Riordan creates these opportunities to have diverse mythology representation through authors of those backgrounds. I just think it gives so much to the story. I really love Arusha in the story. I just really love the characters. I love how it's got so complicated, and it's just a great story. I know book 4 recently came out, so I have to get my butt on and move it. I might just have to go buy it, but I really like this one. I don't know which one's my favorite. I really like this one a lot. I think it showed a lot of growth for Aru, and I'm I'm interested to see where book 4 is gonna go because this one left off on a little bit of a cliffhanger. Kind of reminds me a little bit of what they did in Mark of Athena at the very end of that book, and I remember being like, "Oh my goodness, what is gonna happen?" And I kind of have that same feeling, so I'm really excited to see what they do in book 4. But I really like this one. I wound up giving this one again 4 stars for review. If you are looking for like a more light-hearted read, more like you found in the original Percy Jackson series, this one and also The Last Fallen Star is one that I would definitely recommend your readers towards because I think that they're very, very similar, but a new story with new characters and new mythologies to learn. The book I'm going to chat about in this video is Super Fake Love Song by David Yoon. Again, I really wound up liking this one. I thought it was really, really cute. You rarely get a male-led contemporary novel with no female point of view, and this is what this one is. But you basically follow this girl named Sunny, and he meets this girl that his parents say like, oh, you guys can maybe start dating or just like be friends. And he convinces her that he's a musician, and he leads a double life trying to convince her of that. It was really a fun read. I sometimes get a little bit disheartened when I read books about with Asian main characters because you see the pressure that their parents put on them and it's like unnecessary. The parents can be super cruel in the books that I've read. Not that that's like a representation of real life, but that's just the books I've read. I've read quite a few in the last couple of months. I read American Panda a few years ago. I read Rent a Boyfriend by Gloria Chow. I read Taste of Love, which was a little bit different, but again, very, very harsh parents. This one did not have the harsh parents, and I just liked David's take on it. I also like the music element. I also like the main character, and I thought it was just great. Again, there was a lot of self-discovery elements. There was a strong brother dynamic in this that reminded me a little bit of um What's Not to Love by Emily Webberly and Austin Sigmund Broca. They had like a similar dynamic. I really like this one though. Read it super quickly. I wasn't. like in love with the romance. I don't think the romance did it for me, but I liked it. It wasn't my favorite. I was definitely more invested in sort of the other elements with Sunny, but it was a fun read and I wound up giving it 4 stars. If I had to choose my favorites of this part of the my reading, I would say I really loved A Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow, What's Not to Love, The Last Fallen Star, and Sky Hunter was definitely my most disappointing read. None of these books I hated. That just Sky Hunter just was a little bit disappointing. But I hope you guys like this wrap up. Let me know in the comments what are some of your highlight reads or what books you think you're going to check out now that you heard me speak about them. And I will talk to you guys for my next video. Bye.